Welcome to The Trader, a Spotify Top 10 Traitors podcast. My name is Matthew. I'm a writer working in unscripted TV development, and I am a 100% faithful fan of the multi-award winning hit TV competition series The Traitors. This podcast features deep dives into every episode of the show, as well as interviews with contestants. And this season of the podcast is dedicated to season 2 of The Traitors New Zealand. To help me do this and discuss episodes 3 and 4 today, I'm joined again by the one and only David Bloomberg.
Hello. Yes, I am David Bloomberg, and I am a 100% traitorous fan of the show. For those who don't know me yet, I've been covering reality TV for over 24 years, online, in newspapers, on my own websites, on podcasts, on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, you name it. You'll find me there covering reality TV.
Excellent. And a little follow-up on last time, David. We were under the assumption for some reason that there were only 8 episodes of season 2 of The Traitors New Zealand.
Well, it wasn't an option. There was a website that is about TV shows, and it was the only information that we could find anywhere that listed anything about it. And it said definitively 8 episodes and gave the dates.
Yeah.
And it was wrong.
It turns out it was wrong, yes. So last episode, if you were listening, we were a little confused and we couldn't figure out how they were going to get rid of 22 players in only 8 episodes. Now it makes a little more sense.
Yes.
The person who corrected me, the first person to let me know this was wrong, was actually Jane from the show. So Jane, the traitor, sent me a message on Instagram saying, "Hello, listen to the podcast, enjoyed it. By the way, there are 12 episodes." So I think if we can trust anyone, it's someone who's on the show.
Well, really? Can you trust a traitor?
Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Yeah.
And if you're trusting a traitor, what does that tell me about you?
Well, you already know I'm quite a good liar, so
yes.
And before we
Gotten
get to
better.
Yes, and before we get to our own lies, not just Jane who's sent me a message. We've had actually lots of nice messages on social media over the past week or so since we came back with this new New Zealand season. So I just thought it would be quite nice to read some of them out because it's nice to get nice messages. We've got Maria. Maria has been on the podcast before as a host. And she says, really enjoying catching up on the US season 2 podcast because Maria's in the UK. So that season's kind of just recently become available to UK viewers. So Maria's now catching up on those episodes of the podcast that we did together. I have a message from someone called Laurie, a very interesting message because it says, "Hi, I'm Laurie. I was on the Traitors Quebec." So she was on the other French Canadian Traitors.
Oh.
I wanted to send you a big thank you for your podcast. It was a great help before my adventure. So that was nice to hear, and we had a little bit of a chat after that. I still need to catch up with that season, but at some point I would like to watch it.
First, you have to learn French, huh?
Well, yes, or I get to take up one of those nice offers to translate the entire season for me.
Yeah.
Andrew from the show, Andrew the faithful, sent a message saying he enjoyed our coverage of episodes 1 and 2. We've got a message from someone called Natalie who says, "I'm a Hyundai faithful fan. I've been binging your podcast since I discovered UK Traitors at the beginning of this year. Currently listening to Australia Series 2. There just aren't enough hours in the day. Wish I had discovered it sooner." We've got some messages on X. So there's a user called K Nancy is their username. Says, "I'm so happy you guys are back. I have notifications on for the Trader podcast, or I wouldn't have even known the show was back. Now I'm all caught up." A message from Kevin on X as well says, "Only just caught Australia's Traitors 2, and then shades them a little bit by saying, astonished how bad the faithful were. Maybe it killed the show off there. Love the pod and interviews." There's an account on X called Traitorlytics, which I've mentioned before. This is someone who does lots of sort of infographics and visualizations of how different people vote on the episodes. Traitorlytics says, "Great season so far. Having the Trader pod to listen to as well is replacing the fun discussions of watching along with the nation." And a few messages on YouTube as well. So nice to have you back from one user who's got a strange username that I can't quite pronounce. Someone called Patricia has said, oh, in reference, David, to you mentioning that maybe New Zealand ran out of celebrities. Patricia says, Kiwi here, they're celebrities now. Our population is about 5 million to put everything into perspective. And finally, I think finally, a user called Cornish Dude on YouTube said, lovely to hear you two again. So that was nice to hear.
That was nice. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and I know that we're over exaggerating the smaller population of New Zealand, but when it keeps happening that people who know each other end up on these shows, it is still kind of funny. And also, just for comparison's sake, the state that I live in has almost 13 million population. Just the one state that I live in.
Okay.
So,
That's see, I'm obviously from Scotland, so our population is about 6 million. So
yeah.
you have double my population in your state. So yes.
Yes.
Uh, Now we mentioned, well, I mentioned that maybe I was quite a good liar, and that is because we play a game here on the Trader podcast, and we are about to play it again. This is the trade. I've forgotten the name of it. This is Trader Traitor. Our not so secret mission from here on in is to tell one lie to one another. The lie has to be a fabrication or a made up fact, big or small, about the traitors or about ourselves or about anything else. For example, I could lie and say that in episode 3, Paul, the host Paul, actually fell off of his stepladder
Yeah.
and broke his foot in between takes. However, I couldn't say that I think the portraits in the breakfast room are beautiful, when in
Ah,
reality, I think they're quite weird looking. That would be a
yes.
fake opinion. So we're looking for fake facts, not fake thoughts and feelings. David, are we ready to betray one another once more?
We are. Well, I am. I presume you are.
I am. I was fresh off my victory from last week. I'm more than
Yes.
ready. In that case, our game begins now. And I think we're ready to go ahead and dive into episode 3 of the Traitors New Zealand season 2.
Well, let me just jump in here because you already mentioned the portraits, and I hadn't really noticed most of them except Jackie's, which looks like she's in a permanent state of shock in that portrait. I don't know what they were doing, or I mean, she's not smiling. She looks shocked in that.
Yeah, Jane's looks quite strange as well. Like I feel like they've superimposed their heads onto different bodies or something. I can't quite figure out what the look
Yeah,
is. It's quite unusual. Not sure what's
yeah,
going on. Episode 3 then begins with a little reminder of what happened in the previous episodes. Well, the previous 2 episodes, we found out that Whitney, Mike, and Jane are our traitors for the season, and they then picked a fourth to join them, and that was Jackie. Janae was the first murder victim. In the challenge, Terry is one of the people who went for a shield, but it didn't really matter because he was then banished before he could even use it. And we ended episode 2 on a murderous cliffhanger. We didn't know who they were going to pick to murder next. So we start off at breakfast, and the first people who arrive sort of lament the banishment of Terry, and they have a discussion about the heat that's been on Mark so far. And importantly, Noel says that he doesn't actually think Mark is a traitor, unlike quite a lot of other people. Uh, there is a sort of Whitney versus Brittany situation going on at
yeah,
breakfast. Whitney plants a seed saying that Brittany acted a bit upset about Janae when Janae was murdered, but then minutes later she seemed fine. She was over it. I think that's very suspicious. Of course, we know Whitney is a traitor. She's making all of this up. Um,
Well, and also just from a more objective viewpoint, it's not like Janae actually was murdered. She was a player in the game. I mean, it sounded like one of the cop shows where the cops go in and they're talking to the boyfriend, and the boyfriend doesn't seem upset about the girlfriend having been murdered. And they're like, aha, That's suspicious, and that's the same thing Whitney's doing with Brittany, but she's out of the game. Okay, you move on. I don't know why, from an objector standpoint. Obviously, from a trader standpoint, yes, you want to plant that seed.
Yeah. And the thing is, it seems to work. Like people are
Right.
taking the bait, so it's catching fire. What I also noticed at this point though was that we kind of know already that the traitors haven't murdered Brittany, and she was sort of one of the names that was floated at the end of episode 2 as a possible
Hmm.
because when we talked about it, that was my guess. I just sort of guessed, oh, I think Brittany is going next. But so they don't sort of hold her back till the end of the
Right.
arrivals at breakfast, which just sort of caught my attention as being quite strange. Whitney also reminds us that she too had a shield from the mission yesterday, and she's pretending like she didn't sleep well last night, even though she had the shield. Again, we know the truth.
Yeah.
They talk a little bit about uh, Jane and how she had to really defend herself at Round Table last night. It was a sort of Jane versus Terry situation. Jane then throws out Jackie's name as a possible traitor. And Stephen joins in with suspicions about Jackie. Whitney's stoking it a little too. So it seemed to me at this point, oh, okay, the OG traitors are sticking to their plan that they want to use Jackie as collateral. So I don't think they've abandoned that, even though they've not talked
Yeah.
that much about
Yeah.
it. We get a flashback to Brianna's strange moment at the round table as well, when she accused Terry of saying disparaging things about Bailey, but then she couldn't remember who told her this, and she backs down very quickly, and it was all very strange. We'll see more of Brianna's strange
Mm.
um, behaviors in these 2 episodes. The final group of people arrive at breakfast then, and by process of elimination, we realize that Winnemue has sadly been murdered. And apparently, Brittany doesn't really have much of a reaction to this. And again, Whitney notices it and uses it to her advantage. She
And
talks to,
Kat notices it too on her
yeah,
own after the seed has been planted.
yeah, yeah. So, these, including this in the edit, suggests Brittany is going to be under some fire maybe later in this episode.
Yeah, I do want to go back to Brianna, or Bree as they mostly call her.
Yeah.
I did think it was funny, that she talked about to us in confessional that people were telling her to watch her back, and she thinks it's to scare her because she's a strong player. Bree, if you're listening, nothing against you, but when I see a player spread a rumor and then admit she didn't know where she got that rumor, strong player, as I have air quotes, is not the first term that comes to mind. And I really do think people like Donna were just trying to be nice to her when telling her to watch out.
Yeah, I've actually noticed a few players describing themselves as strong or describing one another as strong players. We're only at this point like 2 or 3 episodes in. I don't
Yeah.
know if anyone's really proven themselves as a strong player yet. I don't know what that means at this point. But
And
it's
it's one thing to describe someone else that way, but describing yourself that way always raises question marks. Like, it's fairly routine for players to be voted out early in Survivor and say, well, they just wanted to get me out because I was such a strong player. No, if you're voted out like first, second, third, it's not usually because you were a strong player.
right.
And I'm not, Bree hasn't, as of now, been voted out or eliminated or whatever. So, not saying the same thing. It's just whenever anyone calls themselves that, raise an eyebrow.
Yeah, yeah. Breakfast then sort of comes to a conclusion with a flashback to the conclave last night, as we're apparently calling it. The traitors thought that Winnemue was, again, they thought he was a strong player. They think that he'll
Mm.
never be banished because I guess he's popular and people like him. So this is the only way to get rid of him from the game.
Right. And he was quiet. And importantly, most importantly, I predicted Winnemue would get eliminated. So,
That is very true. You did. Well done.
yay.
Paul arrives at breakfast room. He, yes, nearly breaks his neck climbing a ladder to take down poor Winnemoo's portrait. And before someone comes and helps him, it was
Well,
I don't know what was going on there. I didn't
well,
meant
I
to do
mean,
that.
first of all, I did think Paul was going down. I thought he was absolutely going to fall. Um, and there's no way any other host that we have seen would even attempt it. I mean, can you imagine Alan Cumming getting up on a ladder? No.
No, no
And so
way.
Utah was going to help him, but then Paul was like, "No, it's too late. Go away." And then Paul did it himself. So
Yeah, I'm finding Paul a little bit more endearing this season. I didn't really warm to him
yes,
last time, but yeah, he's made some funny jokes, and someone else mentioned that online. I think that they're enjoying Paul a little bit more this time around.
yeah, yeah, I think so too. I think he's warmed to the role a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. He gives them a clue as well to finish breakfast by telling them it's going to be a long morning, morning with a U. So they've got a little bit of a hint about what the mission this week might involve.
See, I just assume every word in British English adds a U to a word that has an O in it. So I didn't understand. I'm like, of course it's with a U.
You know, I had this exact thought when I wrote this down. I thought we've talked about words with U's before, but this is a word that's always got a U, right?
Yeah.
Everywhere. So otherwise it's just the word morning, and that's not
Yes. Yeah.
right. So we see some discussions amongst the players round about the house. By the way, I hope you noticed this as well. Why is Jackie clutching a pile of leaves? Like in her, she's doing it in her confessional clips. There's a point in the house later as well. I think she's talking to Andrew or something, and she's holding like leaves. Did you notice this?
I did not notice that.
I don't,
Maybe she's also going into herbalism in addition to all her other ventures, and she
yeah.
found some rare, she found some wolvesbane to ward off werewolves, and maybe she found some garlic to keep the vampires away.
Yeah, I wondered if it was some sort of witchy sort of yeah herbal homeopathic thing, but she's holding like I don't know leaves from a tree in her interview as she speaks. I don't maybe someone can enlighten me, and maybe if Jackie comes on the podcast, we can ask her about it.
Yeah.
And she says that she wants to stay under the radar today by immediately starting another conversation about
Yeah.
Mark.
Yeah. Yeah. She doesn't understand what those words mean.
No, I would have liked if she said under the radar, but hey.
Yes.
So she's talking about Mark again. And Mark, of course, then arrives into the room and asks to take her for a private chat. I I know it's a thing that people do on these shows. Can I have a private chat with you? I find it so uncomfortable. Like if someone asked me to leave the room for a private chat with them, I would instantly not want to do it. I just find it so unnatural. Not that it means they're a
Well, especially with a
traitor
group.
or
Yeah, especially with a group in front of a group. I mean, you're basically calling out, "Hey, we're going to go talk in private here,"
yeah,
and as opposed to just grabbing someone. But the way the New Zealand mansion seems to be set up, people are always in different rooms, so I don't know how else you do it, really.
yeah, yeah,
I don't know that there's a better way to grab someone without just coming in and saying, "Hey, let's go."
yeah. I guess so. And what they end up talking about is that, well, Mark, first of all, he says he's worried that he's made a bad impression. He tells Jackie that he's sure she's faithful, which he probably doesn't really believe, and he
Right.
offers her a deal. He says that they should pretend they don't like one another and keep going at one another in front of the others for the sake of appearances. And he thinks that the traitors will see that, assume that they are still enemies and that they're going to take one another out at the round table eventually, so won't need to bother murdering either of them. It's a little bit convoluted.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think. Does this work? Is it a good idea?
I mean, he also added, if she's a traitor, she'll think he's in her pocket and won't go after him.
Yeah.
That part makes sense. If she's faithful, she still won't go after him. Yeah. Um, it's definitely, it's a game master type move, to try and think through it. But right off the bat, when he mentions, I think we got off on the wrong foot, and she pretends like, oh, what? No, I haven't said any bad things about you. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
really? Really? Um, the other problem is that, as we just talked about, he pulled her aside in front of other people. So they're going to have to do something to act like they're still fighting, even though everybody will now know they had a private conversation.
Yeah.
Like, the proper way to end that conversation would have been to have Jackie or Mark yelling at one another and storm out of the room so that
Yeah,
everybody
exactly.
could see that.
Yeah.
And they didn't seem to have done that. And then, of course, they all go to the cars, and she immediately tells everyone
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, Mark's final words in his interview are, the only problem is she could tell people about this offer. Cut to Jackie
Yeah.
immediately telling people about the offer. You're right. She's in a car with Whitney, Andrew, and Molly and just tells them all about it. I'm going to say at this point, I don't know if you were the same as me, David. I kept wondering throughout this episode if there was an extra player that I'd missed because they kept talking about Brett. And I was like, who's Brett? And it took me a while to realize it's just their Kiwi accent. They're saying Brit for Brittany. And they're saying things like, I'm suspicious of Brett. But there's something about the way they pronounce it that to me sounded like Brett. And I got very confused.
Yeah, with me, it wasn't Brittany, it was Bree, because it took me a little while to realize Bree is Brianna. Uh,
Yeah.
so I was, in these early episodes, as people's real names and their nicknames, start kind of being in process, it sometimes takes a little while to wait. Oh, that's who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Even with Michael and Mike, you can think, oh, wait, are those the same two people or no?
Sure. And we've also got this ongoing mystery of someone potentially not using their real name because it was part of the mission in episode 1 or 2. Although
Yeah, which
we don't know if it was true or false, but it seemed like a weird thing to
it
throw
was
in there.
true, wasn't it? Well, I thought that was one of the true ones.
Because nothing exploded.
Right,
So yeah,
right.
yeah. So
And we just don't know why they're not doing it. I mean, I would imagine that it's something as simple as some people always go by their middle name,
yeah,
but they made it sound like hiding their real first name, like it was some big mystery, and it's like, it's
we
New Zealand. They know each other anyway.
we do have a fan theory about this that I may as well mention now. So Joe, who is a listener, and Joe's been on the podcast several times with me, sent me a really interesting theory, actually. He's watching the show. He thinks, and it's funny, he noticed something that I noticed as well. Do you remember when Terry got banished and when he stood up to announce that he was a faithful? He there was something he said right before he left that sort of caught my attention, but I dismissed it. But what he said was, he did a little speech and he said something like, my wife was a police officer for years and years. So I don't know why he was saying it. I think he was just sort of saying, oh, so I'm really good at spotting liars or something like that. And Joe noticed something that I noticed, which was, oh, that's funny because Jane is also a police officer or like a retired police officer. So Joe has got a theory that maybe Terry and Jane are a couple. And they're doing like a UK Traitors where there's a secret pairing and we don't know about it. And maybe Jane's using like a false name and
But then you'd use a false last name.
Yeah, I guess.
And also, wasn't the whole fight was between those two?
I know that. Well, that's Joe thought it was because that they were married that they were so easily able to argue with one another.
Maybe they're exes.
Yeah, that's what I said. I said maybe they're divorced. And that's why they're coming after each other. But it's probably not true, but I just thought it was a really fun. If it was true, I would absolutely love it.
if it was true, I think the show would have told us in
that
that episode, you know.
yeah, I did think that as well. I thought, well, Terry's gone now, so when are they going to reveal this
Right.
secret?
Right.
It's still a fun theory.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to the cars. So Jackie is now sort of, she's also moving her focus along to Britt, now that I know who Britt is, not Brett.
Yes.
And but Molly is in the car and she's not really buying it. In fact, in her interview, Molly says she thinks that Jackie is being manipulative and therefore
Hmm.
maybe she's suspicious that Jackie's a traitor. We get to the mission then for today, and it is the funeral of poor Winnemou. We've seen missions like this before in kind of in other seasons. Paul tells us that Winnemou selected 12 players to attend his funeral. Those people were Jason, Donna, Bree, Stephen, Utah, Noel, Mike, Brittany, Mark, Bailey, Joe, and Jackie. And that three of these players have been given a silver bar. And it sort of reminded me of missions that we've seen in UK and US, where there's like masked figures in a church, and they have objects on them, and they're holding a secret coin and that sort of thing.
I that was my initial thought until they actually got into it and they had
Yeah,
to more talk about the players themselves.
yeah. Paul also reveals a VCR to the remaining players because Winnemou has left his final message on it. It's, it's quite quirky and fun. I don't really know what the point of it is, but it did make me
Well,
laugh.
I thought it was funny just because I mean it's a VCR and most of them were like, what the hell is
What is
that?
this? Yeah.
And then one of them was asked to, operate it. And I can't remember which it was it Brittany?
It's Molly.
Molly. They said, "Oh yes, have the 22-year-old or whatever she is, do the VCR." And she did. It was funny to see her not having any idea how to work it,
Yeah,
as opposed to someone like me who literally, grew up with it to the point that it's a cliche that when you have a substitute in school they'd come in and pop a VCR or a
yeah.
tape in the VCR. I'm actually old enough that I remember pre VCRs. My aunt and uncle had a reel-to-reel video recorder, which they recorded themselves playing a game show on, which is probably the only reason I remember this recorder. I wish they still had it. I'm sure it would be worth something at this point.
I don't even know what a reel-to-reel recorder is.
I mean, it's just,
Is it like literally? Yeah.
yeah. I know nobody
We're,
could see us, but it's
we're,
like, think of the computers on Star Trek. The computers they always had on original Star Trek were reel to reel.
yeah. Okay, I've
And
got it.
so, um, but yeah, it's just funny to have. I don't know. Like you said, it's quirky. Like, why would they have a VCR? I don't know, but it's kind of funny.
Yeah. And also, I'm glad you mentioned Molly there because there's a little bit of a mistake in the show. Like, Paul says that he says, "Oh, you're 22," and they laugh about her being so young. But seconds later, when she's doing her confessional, and it comes up at the bottom with Molly 24. So, like, so one of them is not right. There's, but when he says she's 22, she doesn't correct him. So something strange is going on. I
Hmm.
know Noel is 22, and they had talked about him being the youngest player. Anyway,
Oh, that's right.
it's
Yeah.
just it's a little detail that caught my attention
Yeah.
as being not quite right. So Paul lists off some superlatives. They've got to decide who's the shadiest, the bossiest, the most annoying, and these people are not the ones that Winnemou left the bars to. So yeah, we've had like similar personality vote based tasks before, just not played out in this exact way, but
Hmm.
this kind of thing happens a lot on the Tracers where they have to decide who's the most this, who's the most that. The players outside have to collect the players inside as they decide who belongs to sort of what title, and that eliminates them. So they're supposed to end up with three left behind. The players inside have no idea what's going on. They are, by the looks of it, really listening to like a funeral service with
Yeah.
some some
There's
actor.
a presumably fake priest who's going through a whole service and having them try to sing hymns and talk about Winnemue. And I mean, the whole thing was incredibly awkward in a funny way. Like Noel coming up to speak and saying, "Well, this is really nice, but we could have used an open bar." Um, yeah, and the people running in and out and grabbing them, and the funnier part was when they would say to them, "Look, I didn't vote for you for this," like most annoying or whatever, and then the people finding out how they had been categorized and being mildly annoyed at that, and so yeah, I thought it was an amusing mission. And the best part of it to me was how short it was.
Yeah. And I'll go through the categories actually. So quietist was Bailey. Well, the who this is who they thought anyway
Yeah.
belonged to these sort of titles. Least favorite Mark, what a shame. Sweetest Bree. I think if they voted again on this at the end of episode 4, they might not pick Bree as sweetest.
Well, I don't think they weren't voting. They were trying to figure out
What Winnemue thought.
uh what Winnemue thought. Yeah.
Sure, sure. That's true. Most trustworthy, Jason. Bossiest, Jackie. Annoying, Joe. Joe takes it pretty well, I think, actually. He kind of laughs it off. Bravest, Utah. Shadiest, Mike. Noel, by the way, looks bored out of his mind and is not enjoying any of this. And then we get to most arrogant, and it's they pick Brittany, and she's not very happy about it. And it
Hmm.
means that Donna, Noel, and Stephen are the three left in the church. The priest then has to hand out the silver. He begins with Donna, and that is correct. However, Brittany is wrong, Utah is wrong. So actually, Noel and sorry, it should have been Brittany and it should have been Utah. But Noel and Stephen shouldn't have been in the church. So
Hmm.
they only end up winning $2,000 from a possible 6,000 in this task. I thought it was a really difficult task actually to get all of those to end up with the three correct people is a pretty tough ask. So I can't imagine anyone doing that well with this.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different. I mean, you're trying to put yourself in Winnemue's head also,
Yeah.
and so yeah, they were lucky they got anybody.
Yeah. And some people, I think even Noel maybe later might be wrong. Some people probably wouldn't have even spoken to Winnemue much. They've only been there a
Right.
couple of days, so
Right.
it's a tough task to do this early on when you're all still getting to know one another. We're back in the cars then, heading back to the house. Again, Brittany is not happy about being chosen as most arrogant. Meanwhile, Bree says that Brittany told her they're gonna banish me. Molly just told me. Uh, who knows if this has got any truth to it
Yes.
at all?
Or she dreamed it.
Yeah. In Brittany's car, she says they should go for Jackie today and Noel tomorrow. Andrew, though, says that he can't write Jackie's name down because we know he's got this sort of guardian angel theory. He does suspect Jackie of being a traitor, but he doesn't want her to leave the game yet because he thinks she's protecting him. Uh,
Right.
uh, And then we get this clip in his confessional, his interview. He is pretty certain. He thinks, this is Andrew, he thinks the
Hmm.
traitors are Jackie, Noel, and Utah. And he's very firm on this and he sticks to it, beyond this point. And I guess we'll probably end up talking more about that as we go on, particularly his suspicions of Noel.
Yes.
We reach the house then. Andrew tells Jackie he thinks that she's his guardian angel. I, I was really surprised that he told this to her. And this is the point. I've written it again. She's holding leaves again. She's holding a pile of
Yeah.
leaves. Um, I I don't know what do you think? I don't know why Andrew told her this.
Yeah. I thought that was strange too. I mean, he essentially just comes right out and says, "You're a traitor. I know you're a traitor, but we'll keep that our little secret," which I don't think that's the right way to do it. I mean, it's one way to do it. It's certainly an interesting new twist. But I think I prefer like the way Sandra did it in US, where she just leaves it implied.
Mm.
And without, she knows who they are, but she stays close to them without saying outright, I know you're a traitor. Because if someone truly knows it, they could become a threat, even if they're promising not to be a threat.
Yeah. Uh, he also he starts to give her advice, and he says if she is a traitor, she should start looking to get out a fellow traitor as soon as possible. I think Andrew's doing a bit too much too soon. Uh,
Yeah.
I
And the other thing is, the reason that a trader would want to keep someone around who they believe is in their pocket is so that we can have the ending that we saw on a very recent different season that I won't mention because we'll get yelled at. Um, where I mean it's happened a few times, but where the trader convinces the faithful, oh, I'm a faithful too. Well, there's no way, let's say that Jackie and Andrew get to the end. There's no way Jackie's going to be able to convince Andrew of that because he already knows.
yeah, yeah,
So one of them has to move against the other earlier than that. And he's betting that he'll be the one to make the move, even though she's the one that has all the power to murder him.
yeah,
So no, telling outright that I know you're a traitor, but I'll keep you safe. I think that's just a step too far.
yeah. We also see Brittany raising the fact that Jackie is apparently suspicious of her and she wants to clear her name. She's with Joe, Whitney, Molly, and Noel at this point. And we cut to her in her interview saying she could not play the game as a traitor. She just couldn't do it. She could only play the game as a faithful. And she swears to the group that she's with that she is a faithful. And
Doesn't just swear. She swears on her children's lives.
yeah, that's one of your favorites, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. But the thing is, and she also says she couldn't go to the end and take the money from someone, which, I mean, you're playing a game where you're literally taking the money from people every time you vote them out. But I mean, this is all exactly what a traitor would say or what a faithful would say. It's meaningless. It is entirely meaningless. You can swear up and down, right and left. I don't care who you're swearing on. It's meaningless.
Yeah. And I've actually just remembered something else about Brittany, which is last week I had mentioned her being having lots of followers on Instagram, and I said, oh, and I kind of made a joke and said, oh, well, maybe she is famous then. Apparently, she has like 500,000 followers on TikTok, I believe. So
Hmm.
she is quite a big deal. Like people do know who she is. I don't know who she is, but I think in New Zealand she's doing pretty well.
I mean,
Um,
500,000 followers in New Zealand. That's from what we know, that's 10% of the population of New
exactly.
Zealand.
Yeah, yeah. Um, So we pretty soon we're at the round table, and it seems like going in, everything is centered on Brittany. And we enter with Joe in his voiceover, and he's saying that he's sure Brittany is faithful. Meanwhile, we've got Whitney explicitly saying Brittany is going to get banished tonight. She's incredibly confident. So
Mhm.
we're gearing up for something to happen with Brittany. Paul tells us that the prize fund at this point is $29,000 and it's represented by the silver bars in the middle. And I just wanted I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but I was going to mention it again. We it's come up a couple of times in the Australian season, they also have silver bars. And I think we wondered why is it silver? Why silver bars? Why don't they use gold
Mhm.
bars? Is that not like more? And someone, actually an Australian contestant, pointed out to me, oh, it's probably because of the idea of Judas and like 20 pieces of silver betraying Jesus. Like it's a sort of biblical reference. And I don't know if that's true,
Hmm.
but it sort of made, there's a logic to it. So it's quite a nice idea. But yeah, when I see the silver bars again in New Zealand, it just reminds me of that.
I
So,
just presumed that there was more silver in that part of the world
Was.
and gold in other parts of the world. I mean, I have no idea. I haven't done a geographical study or anything. So,
Um, Joe begins the discussions at the table then. He says he is done with the chaos, and he noticed Molly and Brittany looking at one another. He
oh
thinks that
yeah.
they are traitors because they've got, I don't know, there's just a look that they gave one another that suggests there's something going on between them. And he keeps using this phrase. He keeps saying, "Don't make me look stupid." Uh, I think he's making himself look a bit stupid, really. I don't think anyone else is doing that. Uh, Brittany is really surprised by this because I think her and Joe get on really well, and now he's suddenly suspicious of her. And Brittany gets upset at the table. She says again she's way too anxious to have played this game as a traitor. She couldn't have done it. This idea of strong players comes up again. She
Hmm.
says she's got a theory that the traitors are getting rid of strong players. Janae, then Winnemue, and now her. So she also thinks that she's a strong player. And then she immediately points the finger at Jackie. She says Jackie has created lots of drama. Whitney then steps in. She brings up this supposed evidence she has. She says, "Brittany, you were very upset about Janae's murder, but you recovered too quickly. I find that strange." And they have this sort of really quick discussion where um, Whitney's saying, "Oh, you something about the way she spoke to Stephen was strange." I think what she's implying is you were upset about Janae one minute, the next minute you were having a conversation with Stephen. I think you're just trying to be friends with everybody in network, and you didn't speak to me or something like that. And Brittany says, "Well, no, I did speak to you. I asked you about your family. I asked you about your kids." Whitney just flat out denies that and says, I don't remember you asking me that. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know who's making up what. I think Whitney is making stuff up.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, she has certainly shown that she's willing to.
yeah. The next thing really is that sort of Donna moves things along. She returns to Jane. She points out, well, last time we were here, there was this big argument, a conflict between Jane and Terry. They were up against one another. Terry went home. We've kind of all now moved on from Jane. Why have we done that? So she thinks Jane is the traitor. But Jane asserts, well, last week, or last episode or whenever, I didn't ever mention Terry's name to anyone. And that kind of brings that conversation to a halt. We don't really see much more beyond that. Um, and then Bree steps in. And,
Yes.
and I know already she's going to say something crazy. So Bree suddenly says, "Well, I heard Donna, you've said my name." Donna gets really annoyed with this. Things get heated. Bree claims that Donna said, "Watch your back."
No, no, no.
Donna,
It's not watch your back. Watch your back. Like in
yeah,
that with that extra tone, when really what Donna said was, "Hey, you might want to be careful and watch out."
yeah,
Maybe she used
yeah,
the words back, but yeah, it was a concerned tone, not a angry tone.
yes. And after yesterday's round table, I'm willing to bet Donna did not say this or
No.
say it in this way. I think Bree just gets a little bit carried away and hears things differently than
Yeah.
they may be. Uh, then there's this sort of other conflict that breaks out. Noel asks Andrew why was so quiet at the last round table. He says, "You didn't really speak. You didn't say anything. You just sat there." And then Kat intervenes and she says, "Hey, Noel, why are you singling out Andrew? There were other people who didn't speak too, like Molly." And then Molly's pulled in and she has to defend herself for being quiet. And Kat pushes her to start providing names. Molly then also names Jackie.
Hmm.
Jackie at this, so a few people have mentioned Jackie at this point. So she decides this is the time to reveal the truth that she is a clairvoyant. I have no idea why Jackie wants to tell everyone this now, or I don't know what it's gonna do. She
Yeah, it's revealing something. I mean, I feel like, and I have to admit, I watch enough reality shows that I sometimes get them confused, but I feel like there are times that people do this where they hide their profession because she had just told people she writes a newspaper column,
Yeah.
which I hadn't realized at the time. I thought she had told everybody about it, um, but then out of nowhere, she's like, "Well, here's who I really." I feel like there was another Traitors where we had a similar thing. Oh, there was the guy who claimed to just be a waiter.
Oh,
Uh,
it was Dirk
Canada.
in Australia season one.
No,
But
but there was
actually,
also there
oh,
was also the guy
oh yeah, yeah,
in
yeah. You're right. You're right.
Canada
Yeah,
um, who got into a big thing, and he's like, "Oh, I want to admit, what was he, a political consultant or something like that? I don't know.
yeah,
Don't fact check me on this, anyone." But out of nowhere, he admits it for no reason. Like nobody is pushing him on it. Nobody is putting pressure on him. And then everybody turns on him and for a little while in his case and says, "Oh, why were you lying?" And that's the exact thing that happens here. Everybody's like, "Well, you lied to us."
yeah. I think she just saw the writing on the wall and thought, well, I'm probably about to get banished. I might as well just throw this out there because I didn't get a chance to tell everyone. I don't know. I think it's
I
just a
I
desperate last minute thing.
I mean, I think she was probably like, "Well, if you feel like I've been hiding something, this is what I've been hiding."
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not that I'm
Uh,
hiding, I'm a traitor. I'm hiding this.
yeah, maybe
And I don't
that's
know that she did expect to get banished because she had three traitors on her side, in theory, in her mind.
I guess, yeah, yeah.
Um, but I do like that she said, "Well, being a clairvoyant doesn't give me an advantage in the game," which is the first time a supposed clairvoyant has ever, been honest like that. Uh, and then the most amusing thing to me is, so I remembered at the end of the first episode, there were clips of what happens in the rest of the season. And one of the clips was her saying, "My guides are telling me it's you." And I was like, "Oh my God, if we have to go through that, I am going to be so annoyed."
Yeah.
But it's actually an out of context clip of what she says here, where with her saying, "I can't be the type of person to say, my guides are telling me it's you." So that was awful sneaky, producers.
Yeah, yeah. It's altogether a confusing moment, I think.
Yes.
So the votes begin at this point. I'll sum up the first 10. So after we rather than go through everybody, after the first 10, Noel has two, Jackie has two, Molly has four, Britt and Jane have one each. The next votes, I'll go through one by one. Brittany votes Jackie, Utah votes Jackie, Jason votes Mark, Noel votes for Molly, Andrew votes Noel, Whitney votes Brittany, Jackie also votes Brittany, Bailey votes Jane, and Bree votes Jackie. And it means we have a tie. We have five votes for
Mhm.
Molly and five for Jackie, which is quite rare in the show, actually. I've only seen it a couple of times before. You would think it would
Yep.
happen more, but it doesn't really crop up very often. So what they have to do is Molly and Jackie each have to plea their case one last time. Then everyone, apart from them, is going to vote one more time, but this time they can only choose from Molly or Jackie. Molly's defense says that she would be a terrible traitor. She says she's sort of too transparent. She couldn't act well enough. And she says this thing which made me laugh. She said, well, you'd all see I was a traitor. And I thought that's not really a great defense because five people here already do think you're a traitor. So, you there's I don't know if that's really convincing anyone. And like you're obviously already doing something that's making people think you're a traitor. And Jackie then has her little moment to plea. She says she's very annoyed that she's being accused of being a liar, because she is absolutely not a liar. And then she says, I'm not going to say I'm 100% faithful. She's sort of implying like anyone could say that, and people say that all the time, so it'd be too easy for me to say that. So the votes are
Yeah,
cast
no,
again.
so
Yeah.
so wait, on Jackie, yeah, I'm sorry, but as someone who has played a lot of these Mafia games, even though anyone can say it, you still have to say it.
Yeah.
You have to say, I have seen so many people get voted out of Mafia games for forgetting to say, I am a civilian, to the point where, like, people who play often will say they'll open every time they speak, they'll say, I'm a civilian and da 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 da, so that no one can say, well, you never said you were a civilian.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
for her to say, I won't say I'm 100% faithful because you'll vote as you see fit, that's huge red flags right off the bat. And then her comment about having multiple income streams, it made it sound like she doesn't need the money.
True, true, yeah.
And so I'd be like, okay, so someone has sent up a red flag and I won't be hurting them financially. Sounds like an easy vote to me.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't think of it that way. So the votes come back in again. They vote again. After the first seven, Molly has four and Jackie has three, and that includes Jane. So Jane has turned on Jackie, her fellow traitor. The next eight votes comes in, and after that, Molly has seven votes, Jackie has eight, and now Mike has also joined in. Mike has
Mm-hmm.
turned on his fellow traitor. We're down to the final two. Last two people to vote are Andrew and Whitney. Andrew goes first, and he votes for Molly, which is not a surprise because we know he thinks Jackie's his guardian angel, all that. Whitney then has the deciding vote, and of course, in true excellent traitor style, the episode ends on a fantastic cliffhanger.
Mm-hmm. And yes, episode 4 picks up with the tie in the runoff between Molly and Jackie. Two of the other traitors have already flipped, as you mentioned, but the final vote is Whitney. My prediction to myself before I started watching episode 4 was that she would join the other two in flipping, and I was right. They had all chosen her as easy bait, and it worked out perfectly. Aside from that, I think we've heard from others this too. She was too strident in her attempts to get the targets on others, and people saw through it. Though, to be honest, based on how she acted before she was made a traitor, she might have acted that way anyway.
Yeah.
Because she was starting to go down that path with Mark. But yeah, she did not see it coming.
Yeah.
The clairvoyant
Of course.
missed this, but she's already said it won't help her in the game. So she announces that she's a traitor, of course, and everybody cheers. Nobody louder than Jane. She literally stands up, to show, because you can't accidentally not show enough enthusiasm. Brittany is thrilled and believes it means that she's been exonerated. Andrew tried to stick with his guardian angel, but it didn't work out.
Yeah.
Now, after the roundtable, people break into groups. Bree is upset about Donna, even though Bree misconstrued everything. And Donna is in a group, and Bree goes to talk to her, but Donna just refuses in front of everyone, saying, not tonight, after what Bree just did. And now the thing is, she explains to us the reason. It's like, we're both heated, and I don't want to say things in the heat of the moment. But she doesn't explain that, as far as we see, to Bree. So Bree's just like, you're just sending me away, and it's another aspect of the whole thing we talked about with Mark pulling Jackie away. It's like,
Yeah.
well, so and then from there, poof, we're in the conclave with the traitors, the remaining traitors, discussing how great things are going for them. Until Paul walks in and says there won't be a murder tonight. Instead, they will select 3 players as gravediggers. They can be faithful or traitors, but then tomorrow night, one will be murdered and tossed into the grave they dug themselves. And I immediately think of a former Survivor player, James, who actually was a gravedigger, and he was like super muscular And I wonder how any of these players will actually be able to dig a grave. Um,
Yeah,
after,
when we see them doing it, it looks really tedious and like time
yes.
consuming.
Well, at first I thought each was going to individually dig their own grave.
Yes, me too.
So I
But
really thought, oh my goodness, how are they going to do that? But um, so then my next thought was that the gravedigger part is just some added meaningless fluff that's thrown in because we've seen this before, the murder list basically.
yeah, yeah,
But then later we'll find out there's more to it than that, which we'll get to at the time. If I were the traders, I would not choose any of themselves to put out to make a gravedigger because the meta of the game now is that of course the traders are going to choose at least one of their own, and then when one player gets murdered, it's a 50-50 chance that the other player is a traitor.
yeah,
So you have to pick all the faithful and let them argue amongst themselves. But for now, we see zero discussion of the thoughts and head straight to breakfast.
yeah. I thought the exact same thing as you, that it would be really smart of the traitors, and it is really smart of the traitors because this is what they do, to not put one of themselves on death row.
Right.
Because
Right.
yeah, like you said, at this point, it's clear lots of, at least some of them have watched the traitors. They know the show, they know the game. So
Right.
at this point, it's sort of a cliche for a traitor to put themselves in there. Like it's actually not going to work anymore. So yeah, I think they absolutely do the right thing.
Right. So for breakfast, Andrew is in first and tells us he knew Jackie was a traitor from the beginning, but she was his guardian angel. And then the people, some other people are with him, and he tells Molly about the whole thing that set off his tradar on Jackie, but then asks her not to tell anyone. At which point, I know for a fact she'll tell people, and he'll become a target. I mean, let's face it; it's if they show us saying, "Here's a statement, but don't tell anyone," you know that it's going to happen.
Sure.
Um, as people come into breakfast, other discussions ensue. Stephen wonders if they know that someone has been murdered, which reminds me that Stephen is on the show. It could be that they murdered last night, quote, and then we'll recruit tonight. Except that people down the table hear him say, we will recruit tonight. Now, I played it back several times. He definitely did not say we.
Yeah.
I could, if people were looking for things where he says, and then we'll recruit tonight,
Yeah.
I think they could hear it as will, as we, W-E apostrophe L-L.
Yeah.
Will recruit. I don't even know how to say that differently because in my accent, at least, it's almost identical. So then they mention it to Whitney, who, of course, plays it up to others because that's what she does. And I'll jump ahead now and note this never comes up again this episode. So it was either a bit of fluff or more likely, since I just mentioned we don't see things that are unimportant, it'll come up next week.
Yeah. Yeah. Might come back to haunt Stephen at some point. Yeah.
Right. So then all the players eventually get into breakfast and they're confused, which they really shouldn't be because they don't know there were 4 traders. So if there were 3 traders, then they always have the option to recruit right away. So when everyone shows up, they should just be like, aha, someone's been recruited. But before they can even get into those discussions, as far as we see, Paul joins them and talks about, making the traders choose 3 players. And now we see clips of the discussion among the traders. And they do indeed mention that players will suspect one of the 3 will be a traitor. And you just said this a couple minutes ago, and we've mentioned it before. The players in this season really do seem to know what's gone on in other international seasons.
Yeah.
And they are acting accordingly. The meta has changed in the game.
Definitely.
And so they choose Noel because he's got some heat on him, Bree because she got heated herself, and Andrew because he also had some heat. And, they don't even know what he said to Molly a few minutes ago. The chosen three won't participate in the mission, but will spend the day digging a grave in Paul's garden, and it will eventually belong to one of them. So to me, and this is what I was talking about earlier, the worst part is, okay, not only are they on the list, but they are going to be actually separated from the others so that they can't join in on the usual discussion and plotting that accompany the mission. And then it turns out later, even after the mission, they get no time to talk to people. They can't defend themselves. They can't try to steer things. This is horrible for all of them.
Yeah, it seems yeah, because later on, you're right that again I'm jumping ahead, but when everybody arrives at round table, these three are already just sort of
Mhm.
sitting there waiting for them. So yeah, there's been no time in between for anyone to debrief on anything or discuss theories. So yeah, I mean, I know this is the game, and what I was about to say was, oh, it feels quite unfair. Uh, but there's so many. We've talked lots about how
Mhm.
the game is weighed in favor of the traitors. So it's just a
Right.
shame that this is one extra thing that's really damning for the faithfuls, and it makes them have no real way out of it.
Right. Right. So anyway, we move on to the kind of pre-mission. The players choose team leaders who have to pick from one of three covered dishes. Jane ends up picking a pig's foot. Ciale gets an eyeball, and Jason is left with a tongue. They're all worried that they have to eat these gross foods. And, it turns out only one third of them are right. Um, Meanwhile, the three gravediggers head out to dig a grave. Noel talks about the topic I had mentioned, that keeping him there means he can't clear his name, which was his plan for today. Meanwhile, we see Mike talking to Molly and Brittany and others, pushing Noel's and Andrew's names when they can't defend themselves. Molly, of course, takes this opportunity to shockingly pass along what Andrew had said about Jackie.
Yeah.
As the other players, the non-gravedigger players, drive to their mission, discussions come up about how one of the gravediggers is probably a traitor, and they speculate about who. So these players are in second level thinking, but the traders this season are at third level thinking. It's like, we know that you think that we know that, and you got to keep upping the game here. The players arrive at what looks to me like a disused hospital with plastic drop cloths hanging all over and blood spattered around. I guess Paul calls it a slaughterhouse. It does not look like a slaughterhouse to me.
No.
Um, and so Ciale's group is first. And so there are five of them seated at a table with covered dishes. They have to identify the body part and animal it came from that's under each cover. Since Ciale had chosen the eyeball, they can only look at the body part. I think we can all see where this is going with the foot and tongue later, but this group is relieved. I thought that they'd have different body parts, but they get the same one, though they each have to give answers independently. Three go with sheep's kidney, which is correct. Two go with pig's kidney. So three being right nets them $1,500.
Is it just
Whitney,
me, or is this really difficult?
I
Like,
think it's really difficult.
how are these? I
Um,
mean, it seems really tough to guess both of those things. Like, just like if they guess one of them, maybe, but the animal part
right.
and the animal, that's tough.
Yeah. I mean, you have to go by size, but a big pig could be the same size as a small sheep, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
So, um, Whitney's group is next. They have to put on blindfolds, and they touch each body part. Whitney guesses cow's foot, which it definitely is not. There is nothing foot-like about it, and to the point that Paul makes fun of her. Um, Mike tells us this makes him suspicious because she's supposedly an undertaker who should know organs. She tells us she knows human organs, but not other organs, but it's like, okay, you still should know a foot from an internal organ. Um, However, going back to Mike, I'm not sure why he thinks she would lie about that, uh, uh,
Yeah.
especially with them both being traitors. Like, yeah, why do you come in saying I'm an undertaker? I don't know. It's strange. Uh, but he continues later that he thinks she came in with the intent to deceive. Really? In the traitor, someone came in with the intent to deceive? No way. But but anyway, he says that he needs her out of the way. I don't know. I mean, yes, we know the traders are all going to turn on each other eventually, but it just seems like a big leap to me. Maybe a leap using a cow's foot. Uh,
Yeah, I don't know if there was like more going on that we're not seeing. Like maybe I don't know. Is Whitney doing like a whole host of things that are annoying
right.
him, and this is just one of them? Yeah. I felt like this would again. Maybe this was taken out of context. Like maybe he actually says this 3 or 4 episodes down the line, and they've thrown it in here. I'm not sure, but yeah, it felt quite sudden to me. I didn't know where it came from.
Yeah. I do think, I mean, not knowing Mike, but the way Mike is playing as a trader is very different from the way Whitney is playing as a
Oh
trader.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I can see him eventually being like, oof, she's drawing too much attention. We got to get rid of her. So yeah. Anyway, others went with sheep intestine, sheep lung, sheep liver, and cow neck. All of them got it wrong. One was close because it was a cow's lung. Um, Next up, Jason's team. And yes, they will be tasting the body part to identify it. Mmm, yum. They're blindfolded and remove their covers, and they're immediately hit with a foul stench. They all take bites, and Jane starts gagging, which almost causes others to gag. The guesses are sheep guts. I'm not sure that they would have accepted that anyway, because guts is not exactly, as Paul points out, a technical term.
Yeah.
Sheep intestine, pig tongue, another sheep intestine, and lamb colon. All incorrect because it was cow intestine. So as you had said earlier, it's not just the part, but the animal. And
Yeah.
how are you going to tell a 6-inch piece of intestine apart?
I
You
don't
know,
know. Paul made a joke at breakfast. He said the vegans will hate this, and
yes.
as a vegan, I did hate it. It's it's gross. Yeah, it's
Oh, it was
even if
as a
I
meat
wasn't.
eater, it's gross. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Even when I eat meat, this I just don't get tasks like this in shows.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy it. It's
Yeah.
and yeah, it feels not even in like the world of the traitors. I just uh yeah, not for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So meanwhile, the gravediggers chat while they work. Noel thinks he's least likely to get murdered because he has the most heat on him. Andrew turns that around and says he agrees Noel won't get murdered, but that's because Noel is a traitor. And Bree agrees. Andrew continues that Noel hasn't been putting forth names, but Noel uses the Dan Giesling defense and says he doesn't want to put out names without evidence. Now, of course, Dan Giesling actually was a traitor, and it was a terrible defense, and it was a terrible idea. Bree says that's the game, and she doesn't trust anyone who won't spread names. So for Bree, it's like spread gossip or else. And Noel tells us he feels like he's with 2 high school bullies, and later adds that Bree has, quote, a vicious mean streak. Bree doesn't understand why he's not worried, and he says, well, I didn't come here to win. I came here for fun. Bree says that he should just leave then because the rest of them came to win. Which, first of all, damn. And, you know, but second of all, yeah, she was blunt and mean about it. But she's right that you should never say that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, again, it goes back to the similar thing Jackie said. If you're just there for fun, oh, then I can get rid of you. You've had your fun, and I'm not taking money out of some poor families, you know, uh, bank account by doing that. So, it, yeah, it's just a bad thing to say.
Yeah. I think Mark
Uh,
is sort of guilty of the same kind of thing. Like
yes.
because he's, we've seen him at the banishment table, like smiling and grinning, and he's having a great time, and he loves
Mhm.
games and it, but it's just not a good look for the other players. Like they're if you're having fun, that's great, but it's a really good way to get yourself some votes, I think.
Yes. Yes. Um, anyway, Andrew says it's obvious that Noel is a traitor and he's going to bring him down. So basically, Andrew's Traidar got one right with Jackie and then completely went on the fritz.
Yeah.
Going back to the players on the mission, they return and are told they earned a measly $1,500 for the prize pool, bringing it up to 30,500. And this is kind of what I expected because the first two missions were kind of big money,
Yeah.
and now they've gotten a pittance, which makes sense because they're only, their top prize value is 100,000, and so they've got to find some way to spread it around. Anyway, they head out, or rather in, for drinks and chat. Brittany brings up in front of a large group, including Whitney, that she thinks Whitney is a traitor because she was joining with Jackie and targeting Brittany. And there's a lot of itney in that sentence. Maybe that's why they say Brit, so it
Yeah,
doesn't get
yeah.
confused. Whitney says she was just being supportive and also came to her own conclusions because Britt had said early on that everyone in the room was faithful when there was no way to know that. And they go back and forth with accusations while Mike watches and thinks Whitney isn't doing a good job. The whole thing about I know everyone in this room is a faithful when there was no way to know that. Again, I understand why Whitney's saying it because Whitney is a traitor and she has to find a way. But logically speaking, well, of course you're going to say that. You're not going to try to antagonize people and say, well, I know someone in here is a traitor.
Yeah.
And so with that, we head to the round table where, as you mentioned earlier, the gravediggers are already sitting there. So yeah, they just have to come into it cold, not knowing anything. But Andrew takes the lead. He jumps right in and says there are only three of them fighting for their lives, so the faithful would learn the most by only focusing on the three of them. Andrew is willing to double his odds of going home because he believes so strongly in the evidence he's about to present, which, of course, is about Noel. Andrew talks about what Noel had said, making it sound a bit worse than it was. And he adds that he spent a lot of time with Jackie, and she never brought up Noel's name as a target, which is suspicious. Jason brings up that Andrew and Bree look scared, but Noel doesn't. And others ask for Bree to speak up, and she does, but not in the way we expected. It's Bree's crazy hour time. She says that while she joined in Andrew's attack on Noel today, she was doing it to get into his head and see how he behaved. But really, she thinks Andrew was acting as a traitor would to target Noel because he already had suspicion on him. And so people are getting confused about this, and focus turns back to Bree as she's called erratic. She says, yes, she throws out lots of names. She's probably named everybody there, but that's because she wants to win. At which point I'm just thinking that's not how you win. That's not even close to how you win.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's just too it's
Too
even
much. It's too
it's too
much.
much,
Yeah.
and we've seen this before in seasons where I think she's sort of causing so much chaos that actually some people might not
Mm-hmm.
think she's a traitor, but still just not really want her in the game. So just
Yeah.
might find it very easy to vote her out anyway.
Yeah, because if she's literally just throwing names out there and she admits it, well, she could throw your name out and it could stick.
Yeah.
And Joe, among everybody, tells us that he doesn't like her. But then Brittany talks about Andrew being close to Jackie, which I was wondering when someone would pick up on this aspect of things.
Yeah.
Uh, so then he tells his guardian angel story and gets confused looks around the table, even more confused looks than Bree got. And it feels like things are just getting started and there's going to be more arguing, but Paul says the time for talk is over. Who knows? Maybe there was more time that they talked and argued. Maybe not. There's no way to know. So here come the votes. I don't have them nicely summarized like you did. So Donna votes Noel. Stephen votes Andrew. Brittany votes Noel. Utah votes Andrew. Jason votes Bree. Noel votes Andrew. Andrew votes Bree, which he had mentioned something about, oh, look, I'm switching my vote. I'm not voting for the person that you thought because, I'm changing things. Whitney votes Noel. Bailey votes Andrew. Bree votes Andrew. Ben votes Andrew. Molly votes Noel. Ciale votes Noel. Mark votes Andrew. Jane votes Noel. Kat votes Noel. Joe votes Bree. Mike votes Andrew. That puts it at Andrew 8, Noel 7. I guess I could have just said that at the beginning. Andrew acknowledges that he dug his own grave in more ways than one and reveals, of course, that he is a faithful.
Yes.
Ciale tells us the round table was a waste of time with the Andrew and Noel show. And Noel gave a little smile at the end, which, again, I went back and replayed that multiple times. There was no smile. The closest thing to a smile was him leaning on his hands and it pushing his mouth a little bit. But otherwise, no, there was no smile there. And even if there was a smile, okay, he smiled because he wasn't voted out. I don't know why, but.
Also, I've barely seen, I don't think I've ever seen Noel smile in 4 episodes. He just looks miserable all the time.
Noel tries to speak up and defend himself from some of the earlier accusations, but Ciale shuts him down, won't even let him finish before they all get up and leave. So they break off into groups, and Donna leads off by saying it's obvious Noel is the traitor. So if he's there tomorrow, they have an easy vote. And I was thinking the same things in terms of what they'd conclude. Bree is the obvious target for murder, leaving Noel as the favorite to get banished. I'm watching this thinking episode 5, maybe predetermined already. Especially since Whitney is in that conversation and hears it all, so she could be like, okay, easy thing to do. We'll just do that. And Jane confirmed to us that it was a good night for the traitors. But perhaps because it'll be obvious, we don't even get to the traitors meeting in this episode. The preview shows us both Bree and Noel getting an envelope, which is odd, with Noel reacting and saying, what the hell? Plus, Mike continues with what we talked about earlier and starts planting Whitney's name. That's all we get for the preview. And we're left there.
It's funny, I saw the first few seconds of the preview of next episode, but I very quickly sort of turned it off. Because I mean, I guess it doesn't really ruin anything, but I never watch. I always worry that it might ruin something, but yeah, I did see the 2 clips of both Noel and Bree take a seat and read something from a letter. So I mean, yeah, what is your prediction? What do you think is going to happen? I mean, who's going?
I think they're going to murder Bree and Noel will be voted out unless there is some sort of twist. Like maybe like the gravedigger who isn't murdered gets some sort of immunity from banishment in the next vote, and that's the letter that he gets. But if it's not that, I think they'll just murder Bree and then everybody will banish Noel, and it'll be a kind of a boring episode, which if they foresaw that, if production foresaw that, that's why they might give, like, I say immunity. Maybe it's an automatic shield or something like that. Well, no, a shield wouldn't help because it's got to be protecting him from banishment.
Yeah,
So yeah, it is kind of immunity or a super shield or something like that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I I would guess the same thing that they will murder Bree because Noel is so likely to get himself
Hmm.
banished. They don't really need to do anything. So yeah, that's my guess. It's yeah,
Yeah.
again, like you said, it feels quite obvious, but
Yeah.
sometimes that's just the way the game goes.
Well, and also, the previews, as we discussed earlier, previews can lie.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
so it reminds me of back in the early days of, I don't know, did you ever see the show Dallas? It
I
was a kind of
yes, I know what it is.
okay. So it was kind of a nighttime thing. At one point, there was a big cliffhanger at the end of the season. Who shot JR?
JR. Yeah, yeah.
And to keep the mystery, they filmed every actor and actress shooting JR so that even the actors themselves would not
Mm.
be able to give it. And I remember even there was a scene in a kind of behind the scenes of the actor who played JR shooting the gun and then turning the camera going, wait a minute, that can't happen. But uh, uh and so I'm thinking, oh, maybe they had both of them sit down to read letters just so they could put that in the previews.
Yeah, could be. I mean, they do that with some like competition shows. They shoot multiple end like different people winning,
Hmm.
and then so even the contestants don't know until it airs
Right.
what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I guess it's not unbelievable that they might do something like that. Sure. Do you have any other sort of overall thoughts on both of the episodes?
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was interesting to see Andrew's strategy kind of play out through the whole his 4 episode arc there. I thought it was a very good strategy early on. And then it just backfired on him spectacularly.
Yeah.
And, I think it's because the idea of a guardian angel traitor is a good one, as is keeping around a known traitor for that reason. We've talked about it before, we've seen it before, but he needed to, one, not be so honest about it, uh, and two, do a better job of explaining himself. Because we even saw in the most recent US version, people don't take kindly to that. They even if they themselves might think about playing the same game, the idea of a faithful cozying up to a traitor, they almost get offended by it. Like, what? Our goal is supposed to be to take out traitors, not cozy up to them. And so they kind of forget, the real goal of the game sometimes. So I don't think it was his strategy that did him in. It's rather the way he
The
explained
execution
himself
of it.
afterwards.
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I'm really disappointed to see Andrew go. I thought he was a
Hmm.
really interesting player. He listens to the podcast, so I'm a fan. Yes, it's the same as you. I thought he would do better than he did. I think he was got so convinced about Noel and Utah, he believes, or
Hmm.
he got so convinced of it that it just got in his own way. And he sort of didn't leave any room for doubt. And obviously the whole thing about Jackie, just I don't think he made a wise decision by telling people about his guardian angel theory. So yeah, it's a shame. I was really sad to see him get voted out at this point. But yeah, I'm curious to see what happens with Bree and Noel. I am curious to see if there's the names that have come up already, like Brittany. Are people going to look back at Brittany? I mean, remember in episode
Right.
one, Mike had a lot of suspicion on him, and now everybody's decided he's just a nice, quiet guy. I wonder if anything's ever going to come back around on him. That little moment with Stephen that you talked about at
Right.
breakfast, and Whitney claims that he said, we will murder someone, and yeah, so I'm really eager to see where it goes, who's going to come under suspicion in the next 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be interesting.
Now I put out a call last time for some listener questions, and we've had some responses. So, David, I am
Okay.
going to put these to you. First question is a great one. This is from Alan. So, Alan has been on the podcast before. He's co-hosted with me.
Hmm.
He's a big fan of the show. He's watching in New Zealand, and Alan has noticed this thing that we've talked about. In fact, we've talked about it in these two episodes. Quite often in the Tracers, a player's job becomes an issue, like what they do in
Yeah.
real life. So sometimes if somebody says, I'm an actor, people
Hmm.
get really suspicious and say, oh, then that means you'll be a great traitor. We must vote you out.
Right.
So Alan asks, what for you and I think, David, what would be the least threatening job you have or had that you'd mention to the faithful, regardless of your status as traitor or faithful? Like, so what job have we had that we think we'd be quite safe in telling them about that would serve us well in this game?
I mean, I think I would just say, my old regular job, okay, I'm retired and I used to work, for a state agency as an engineer, and leave it at that. And um, I don't think engineer is often viewed as too threatening a job title. I See, in my situation it's more difficult because this is often come up with people who say, well, would you ever play Survivor? And besides the fact that I don't think Survivor would take me just due to I don't know that I'd pass the medical. But aside from that, people know me. And I think the fact that, we have people in Traitors New Zealand who have listened to the podcast and know you and know me, we'd have to be the ones hiding our names, But in my case, well, in your case too, because you sometimes post pictures of yourself, um, you know, I do video podcasts in other cases. So it would be difficult for me. I almost feel like I'd have to tell the truth
Yeah.
and then immediately be targeted, which, there's not a whole lot I can do about that.
Yeah. Uh, yes, I certainly wouldn't tell people that I hosted a podcast all about the Tracers.
Hmm.
Uh, I wouldn't tell people that I think even if I said I worked in TV, that would raise
Yeah.
suspicions.
No, you've got to go back to your teacher
Exactly.
roots.
I was a teacher for many years. I think people might decide, oh, you're probably quite reliable and trustworthy.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would just go with English teacher.
Right.
Think that might do me well. We've got another question from now. This is quite a big question, so we might have to sort of minimize it a little bit. So
Okay.
someone on Instagram called Mrs. Donna Officer says, "Give us rankings on everyone left,
Oh
um,
my.
and predictions of top five." I don't know if I can go through every player. Can't even. I don't. You still don't know everybody's names yet. I could maybe I could predict a top
Yeah.
five. I could do that. I probably need them in front of me. Off the top of my head, I should have obviously like planned this ahead and written it down. I
Hmm.
think actually I'm going to say Mike is might do quite well as a traitor. I think he might make it
Hmm.
quite far. So I'm going for Mike. Uh, Donna seems quite sort of switched on, and seems quite savvy. Of course, she could get murdered at any time. Uh, Cat seems to be
Hmm.
quite sort of observant and clever, even though I think sometimes she's mishearing things and getting carried away. Um, and I'll go with a couple of quiet people who might fly under the radar, like Bailey. Although again, because she's quiet, she may get murdered early on. And one more, Utah. There's my top five.
I'm looking through, so I have the list in front of me now. I'm looking through them, and I have to admit, some of these people, like I was scrolling, and I got to who did I get to here? That Bailey. I'm like, oh, that's right, Bailey is on this show. And then I got to Ben, and I was
Oh,
like, oh, yeah.
Actually, I'm going to switch out Ben for you, Utah for Ben, because Ben was one of the players who also in episode 1 or 2 figured out he actually does think that Jane is a traitor, but he doesn't want to let it on. So he's
Mm-mm.
doing the opposite of Andrew. He's not going to tell anyone his theory. So maybe that
Yeah.
will serve Ben really well.
Yeah. I can't pick at this point. I do think I agree with you about Kat. I also think that um oh gosh, who else were you saying? Remind
I
me. Oh, I think that Mike will do well as a trader. Um, Jane, I think will last longer than Whitney. I can't say she'll make it to top five, but I think she will at least last longer than Whitney. Donna, I think is another good one. So it's so hard at this point because
yeah.
there's some people we've seen so little of, and it's a question of did we see so little of them because they're playing well and staying under the radar, or because they're not going to really be of any interest in the overall end game?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Uh I have another couple of questions. One is from this is a similar question, but much we can give a much shorter answer. Harry on
Hmm.
Instagram asks us, "What's your guess this year? Traitor or faithful win?" And I kind of already, I think I replied to Harry already, but I said I would address it on the podcast. I'm
Mm.
based on very little. I'm going to go traitor win purely because, and not that I'm suggesting that producers interfere with the
Right.
outcome, but, and this is not a spoiler because if you watched the first episode, you already know who won the first season. Because
Right.
Faithful won the first season of New Zealand, I'm just going to throw traitor out there and say that this time it'll be a different outcome.
I mean, I just think traders always have the advantage
Yeah,
because, of course, you can never fully get rid of them until the very end.
yeah,
So, yeah, I'm going to say trader.
yeah. I'm going to add another caveat to that. I think it will be a recruited traitor. I think it won't be any traitor who's in it right now. I think they'll recruit a faithful who will then become a winner.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we've seen that often enough.
Yeah. And my final question from a listener again is K Nancy on X. And we've talked about this before, but I'll ask it anyway. K Nancy asks, don't psychics, who thus far have been useless on the show,
Oh,
think it's bad for business to be bad on the traitors? In fact, I think you've already answered this on X on Twitter.
yes, yeah, and it's basically it. I think that the people who have been on the so-called psychics that have been on are so there are two classes of so-called psychics. One who are fooling themselves, and one who fully know that they're not and are just using it as a con to fool others.
Mm,
Most of the ones you'll see on TV are the ones who are fully using it as a con, or the ones that have big shows. Um, and anyone who ever asks you for money, and if anyone goes to a psychic, a tarot reader, whatever, and they say you're cursed and you need to bring me some item of value, you need to bring me money. That is a con game. It is a well-known con game. Do not do it. But
yeah,
anyway, I mean, people have lost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Um, so I think the ones that we have had so far have all been those who are fooling themselves. They truly believe in their own powers, and therefore that's why they're not worried about coming on. And I think that's also why we had one in was it Australia who left,
yes, yes,
who left because I think that the mental effort of trying to um, you know, say yes I have these powers, but then realizing those powers were not leading her in the right direction was just too much for her. And I think that's why she ended up leaving, was basically to save her own sanity. That she just, the cognitive dissonance there was too much for her.
yeah,
So that's why I think people come on. And of course, now we found out that Jackie says, oh, this wouldn't have helped me anyway. So that's an easy way. That's even easier out than any of the other people.
yeah. I think I replied on X as well already, and I think my response was similar that
Yeah.
yes, it probably is bad for business if you
Yeah.
are claiming to be psychic. I don't know why you would put yourself out there like this to play a game where it's very difficult to win. So you just
Right,
are probably
right.
going to end up looking like you
Yes.
are getting things wrong all the time because
Yeah.
you will get things wrong all the time.
Right.
That's all the questions I have this time. Again, it's really great having them. So, listeners, if there's anything you want to ask about episodes coming up, send them my way. I can tell you how to do that in a few minutes, but before I get there, David, you and I have been playing a game this whole time. We've been playing
Hmm.
the Traitor. Now I remembered what the game was actually called. Uh, I
Yay.
I I told you a lie during our discussion. Did you tell me a lie?
I did.
Okay. I I'm I I can't remember what order we did this in last time, but I I have a few guesses for you again.
Okay.
Well, I I think you might have lied about something in episode 4 because you knew I wasn't taking as many notes as you were, so you could maybe get away with it.
I mean, that's presuming that I thought that through, but yeah. Okay.
Or you talked about the TV show Dallas, and I know about the who shot JR storyline was a big thing, and you said that they filmed different endings with all the actors. I can kind of believe that probably happened, but and then you said they even did a joke one with JR himself, or the character JR. I wondered maybe you made that up, but I'm gonna go way back to the first one that I wrote down, which was I think you talked about your aunt and uncle having a reel-to-reel machine. Is that what you call it? Was that the lie?
No, that was real. Real to
Yeah,
real.
no pun intended.
Yeah.
Was it any part of that story?
Nope.
Oh,
No,
okay.
they went on a game show. It
Oh,
was a game show where I don't remember the name of it. I guess I could look it up somewhere. But one of them had to run through a maze. It actually is not dissimilar from some things that happen on Survivor and other challenges. But one had to run through a maze the maze was too tall they couldn't see, and the other was in a booth above the maze and had to direct them through the maze. That's
okay,
all I remember about the game show.
okay.
Um, so so
It's
yeah, no, that
it's
was that was
sounds
not the
like
lie.
a giant version of the board game Mousetrap. Um, in that case, I'm stumped, so you're gonna have to tell me
Well,
what it is.
as it turns out, I accidentally picked something that you didn't really pay attention to, which is the preview.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
because Noel did not say what the hell. He said, seriously?
Very good. Well done. Yeah. No idea. No idea. I totally believed you. David, any
Well, and then
idea?
when you said, oh, I didn't even watch that, I was like, yes.
Man, right, from now on I need to watch the preview.
Yeah.
Any idea what I lied to you about?
The only thing I can think of, and this is one of your typical lies, so this is why I'm going with it, is you had mentioned, I think it was Brit having 500,000 followers on TikTok. Was it Brittany that you said that about? I
I did
believe.
say that about Brittany.
Okay. And I know she's an influencer, and I know she has a lot of TikTok followers. 500,000 is a lot. And so I'm going to say that is the lie.
I I thought when I said that you might think it was the lie, but it's not. It's actually the truth. And again, I hope this is okay to say this on the podcast. It is the player Andrew from the show who let me know this. He sent me a message saying, "Oh, Brittany has 500,000 followers on TikTok, so she's definitely famous by New Zealand standards." Uh,
I had my phone here and I was thinking I could look it up. I could go and I could pull up TikTok and I could search. But I didn't. I wanted to keep the integrity of the game.
uh,
And so I will search now and see.
this could be completely wrong, but I'm going, if it's a lie, it's an
It's an
inadvertent lie.
accidental
And
lie
I'm
then.
believing what
Yes.
I'm being told. I
Well, I'm
trust
still
Andrew.
interested to find out myself at this point. Because I want to follow her in that case. Okay, Brittany Cunningham. And she apparently, according to this article, was a content creator ever since she started renovating her home. Here's Britt Cunningham. Britt, it's Britt. See,
But
Britt Cunningham.
yes.
She only has 429,000. You
Well,
lied. You
I'm
lied.
I'm sorry. I was 70K out. My actual lie. Another really sneaky small thing that you probably would never pick up
Hmm.
on. I was talking about the silver bars, and I said, "Oh, we've talked about this before." And we have talked about it before, and
Hmm.
someone once did tell me, "Oh, it's probably because of the idea of
Right.
Judas and silver." But I lied and said, "Oh, it was an Aussie contestant. It was an Australian contestant who told me this," and that was my lie.
Ah,
I just added that bit. It was not.
okay.
I think it was somebody on YouTube who pointed it out in a comment.
Ah, how do you know they weren't an Australian
Well,
contestant then?
they could have been. That's very true.
They were undercover.
That means, well, we both deceived one another. Neither of us
Yes.
have been successful this time. Um, so we'll try again next episode. See if
Yes.
we can catch one another out.
Yes.
Now, as always, you can leave a review. You can follow the podcast and subscribe on wherever you're listening, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. We're very, very close to 400 subscribers on YouTube now, which is very exciting for me. So if you haven't already, just for my ego, just subscribe, please. And you can also keep up to date on Traitors news and podcast updates on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at the Tradar Podcast or on X at the Tradar Pod. And you can email me at the Tradar Podcast at gmail.com. And lastly, you could visit the coffee page for the podcast just to help me with the cost of running it. And that is ko-fi.com/Matthew Keeley. The link to that is in the episode description, wherever you're listening to the podcast. And you can chip in as little or as much as you like there. And it's not a subscription. You can just do a one-off donation if you feel like you wanted to do that. And thanks to
Can
everyone
they
who already has done that.
can they donate silver bars?
They can donate whatever they want. If it's something I can sell, go for it. David, where can we find you online?
I am, of course, all over social media and reality TV podcasting. You can find all my various accounts through my link tree at linktree/David Bloomberg with a dot before the EE in the URL there. Or you can find me directly on Twitter and Blue Sky as at David Bloomberg, and on the video platforms TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram as at David Bloomberg TV. Because Threads is connected to Instagram, I'm at David Bloomberg TV there as well. On all the video platforms, I don't have 500,000 followers. Uh, I'll need people to subscribe and follow so I can someday aspire to getting to that number. The most I have on YouTube, I have over 30,000, which most of which came from one single video, one single short video drawing a lot of attention. But on those different platforms, I post at least one, often more, reality TV short videos each day. Lately, they've been a combination of The Traitors New Zealand, The Mole Season 2, The Amazing Race Canada, and Survivor flashback videos from older seasons. And of course, in the US, tonight, as we're recording this, Claim to Fame starts up again. So I'm sure I will have some videos from that as well. Plus, US Big Brother will be restarting in about a week. So not only will I have lots of short videos from that, but I will be back weekly on the Rob Has a Podcast Network with my Why Blank Lost, and should have a preview podcast before it begins, presuming they give us enough time.
Fantastic. We will be back next time to talk about episodes 5 and 6 of Traitors New Zealand, and we will find out the fate of Bree and Noel. Until then, keep us on your radar.
And stay traitorous.